Test, test, test.
What to talk about?
3 minutes. 3 minutes through. Meeting launch.
Sounds good. I've tried to call you sooner.
No, Reggie did. Reggie let me know right off the bat, said you were planning and stuff, so I can talk about the back of the 15 minutes. Pat, how are you? Good, Sean. Anybody take your job yet? Yeah, let's twist somebody's arm. Gonna talk to us tonight? Okay, good. Thanks for coming.
Hello at the meeting. Hello.
No, I can't have food. But one time it was. Yeah. I'm going to announce it. See if we can get some. Then the newsletter editor.
And a membership.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Mike.
Oh, okay.
Hello, Michael.
Oh, super Scott. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. But I have another bottle for you.
Hello. Everybody
Hello.
can take a seat. We'll get started here. Pat, Halligan, all you guys out there, get in here and take a seat. The treasurers too. I think we'll start out with the pledge, so everybody please rise. Gary, if you would, I'd appreciate it.
Okay.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And a moment of silence for all those that have fallen protecting our freedom. Thank you. I don't have a whole lot of business items on tonight's agenda. When the newsletter comes out, you'll see in there that we're hoping to recruit a new president. I'm going to try to hang up the gavel for a while at least. So Jim Fisher said, if you're leaving, I'm leaving too. So we're going to need a president and a vice president. And so hopefully we can find someone that'll fill those two roles. The other role we're looking for is a newsletter editor. Sean has been battling, like a lot of us that are still working, not retired yet. It's hard to find good help and adequate help. So a lot of people end up working a lot of hours. I know Sean's been working 16 hours a day, and it's hard to get a newsletter out doing that. So if we can find a newsletter editor, I've got some ideas, but if anybody else is interested or has ideas on someone that would be willing to do that, that would be awesome. Pat, did you want to talk about the banquet?
Well, just to let you know, we're a little over 100 people right now signed up for it so far. So hoping for a few more here. We're hoping to get maybe at least 120, 140 or so. The banquet facility here holds 240 people, they said. With 140 or so, we'll be able to spread out nice, put 8 people to a table, and should be good to go. The cutoff date to get your ticket into me is the 26th here, so that's about a week and a half or 2.5 weeks from now. So I did bring some blank forms in case somebody has lost theirs or whatever needs one. I can give you one tonight. I've got a few, and we can fill one out. And pay me, I prefer cash. It's a lot easier to hide, but if you want to write a check, that's okay too. At the banquet this year, we are giving out, the FAA will be giving out 2 Master Pilot Awards to Jerry and Jerry. Jerry Farrell and Jerry Sherrill. Both here. I know I saw them earlier. There they are. They're getting the Wright Brothers Master Pilot Award at the banquet this year. So we're trying to find someone from the FAA that will give them the award. I guess everybody in the FAA is kind of not too sure about these 2 guys. So we're trying to find somebody that knows how to lie real well and tell them how good they are. We'll find somebody for you. I've got some good silent auction items so far. King Ground School has given me the whole private pilot course. So if any of you guys that flew for the airlines need a little refresher again, it's like a $473 gift or whatever there. We've got that. Tannis engine heaters, they've given me a cabin heater, one you plug in and put like a timer on it, and when you get out like a cold morning, your cabin inside the airplane will be warmed up, and all your avionics will be warmed up too. I think that thing's, I saw on their website, it's for $370. Sporty sent me a nice bag for original bag for carrying headsets and iPads and stuff. That came in the mail yesterday. Apple Ford dealership over here, they're giving us a Nautilus. I think that's a Continental. Somebody might be able to tell me what vehicle that is. But they're going to give us, it's called Date Night. And they'll give you the vehicle for the weekend. You can put up to 200 miles on it. And they're giving you a $200 Visa card to go with it. So you can take your significant other and go drive around Lake Minnetonka and take her out for dinner or whatever. And so that's pretty cool. And I got a bunch more stuff too. So we got some good silent auction items. So if you need a blank form, let me know. Otherwise, I hope to see all of you on October 3rd. So from there. Thanks.
Thanks, Pat. Kim, did you want to talk a minute? I was looking for you. You were hiding.
Just a quick announcement, good and bad news. Let's do the bad news first. One of our longtime members, chapter president, airplane builder, asked to be removed from the roster. And sadly I say, okay, John Closer can no longer maintain his membership here. The good news is that we've got lots of new people here I've seen tonight, and I've got emails from other people. So can I ask about the guests that I've talked to tonight? Would you please stand, please? Yeah, and tell us your name and a little bit about your airplane interest.
Yeah, I like airplanes. I'm sorry. My name is Nick Motter. I live in Prior Lake. I'm a refugee from Northwest Airlines, Auxiliary Guard.
Welcome. Let's
George Williams, I've owned enough airplanes that kept the bank account very small over the years. I'm a refugee from Northwest also.
welcome.
Official resident of the state of Minnesota.
Okay, cool. Welcome. So.
Brian King, Lakeville, I have a hangar here. I've been on the field for about 12 years. I used to be right across here, just standing on the end. I've come to a few of these in the past, and I should have been coming all these years. I'm sorry. I have a Piper Cherokee here. I have a Flying Very Easy. So you can see that around, the white, red, black one. It's mine. I'm restoring a Long Easy, and I just picked up a Cozy 3. So I'm kind of in the hole.
Super.
Yeah, the Cozy 3, if anybody had ever seen it out here from the past, was a former owner out here, Dave Gray. He stopped flying in 2000, but it was a 1996 Oshkosh Award winner, and it stopped flying 3 years after that. So I picked that up from him and hope to have it back in the air next spring.
Super. Welcome.
Thank you. Can anybody think of any, Chris, did you want to talk Young Eagles? Give an update?
So we have a couple kids signed up for this Saturday for our monthly Young Eagles rides. We have about 7 kids and 2 pilots. So the weather looks like it's gonna work out, be decent, kind of like it's been the last couple months, and kind of like today and stuff, decent weather and stuff. If anybody wants to come out and help with ground crew, kind of a social time and stuff, it won't be that much work, but nice day at the airport and stuff. Plus, it's nice to talk to the parents. Some of the parents have no idea about aviation. So last month we had a college student come out that was a past Young Eagle from like 3 years ago. And so for him to talk to the parents about his experience with aviation, you know, doing his flight lessons and getting his license and stuff, it kind of gets, you know, closer to home and they understand things better and stuff. So any of us interacting with parents is kind of helps to know aviation and, you know, maybe get the kids going, you know, pursuing aviation and stuff. So, and then last month I did talk about the Girls in Aviation Day. It's in 2 weekends, September 25th, over at Flying Cloud. It'll be at Jet Links. They're using their hangar and part of the tarmac. Kids want to sign up to go. They're still able to do that. Sign up on the website. Look at Stars of the North for their website. Otherwise, contact me and I can give them information. So it's geared for, you know, kids like 8 to 17, but younger can go, and for boys and girls. So.
Thanks, Chris. I think the last thing I have on my agenda real quick is some items were donated to the chapter. I'd like to auction those off real quick. So I've got looks like an older Flightcom headset. Anybody interested in that? $5 to start with? Not real popular item, I'm thinking. Okay. We'll call it a no sale. All right. I've got a Sigtronics portable intercom. It looks like brand new. 2-place intercom. Plugs in. I think it takes a battery too if you don't have short power or whatever. Anybody interested in that for $5? $5? I'm gonna bid 10.
Where's vodka?
He's in England. He doesn't count anymore. You do 20? Anybody higher than 20? 20 going once, going twice, 3 times. You're the winner. All right. I have an ELT. It looks like it needs new batteries. Anybody interested in the ELT for $5? I have no idea what it is really, but it's ELT. I have a manifold pressure gauge. That's probably an antique. It needs to go on the shelf, right? No interest in that. $5. I have a compass. Goes on the dash. Looks like it works. Did last night. Points east. $5. There's $5. Anybody want $10? $5. Sold to Dan. All right, that's all I got. Oh, Gary? Yeah. Right. Take some food home with you so we don't have to throw anything out.
Hey, Mike, did you do anything about books I got going?
The what?
The books I got going?
Yeah. We'll do that sometime. Yeah.
If you go back to that headset, I think I can find $5.
Okay. So, all right. Tonight's speaker is Chuck Cook. Chuck and I have been working on this for almost 2 years, I think. I think we actually had it scheduled for like April or May of 2020, and then COVID hit and it just didn't work. So finally, we're coming around to in-person meetings and really excited to hear this presentation tonight. And I really appreciate Chuck showing up. So round of applause. Welcome, Chuck. Sorry, Pat messed up your slide. Sure.
Oh, pretty good. It was a long line.
Delivery fee.
Well, first thing, I want to thank Mike for inviting me to speak. Second thing, I want to thank all of you for coming to hear me. It's a privilege, and I'm happy to share my story. Tell you about fire in the cockpit and crash landing, and talk a little bit about survival and hospitalization. It's a very dramatic story, and I don't need to dramatize it. It's a story about an in-flight fire and a violent crash, and also about survival and the human will to live. Persevering, feeling, maintaining hope. At the end, I'll offer some suggestions.
I love watching Dad talk.
Safety of flight and some as it pertains to fire. Those that don't know me, I'm Chuck Cook from Ham Lake, been flying out of Anoka County, based out of Anoka County since 1981. Private pilot, not commercial, all general aviation. My lifelong passion, I've accumulated about 3,500 hours in a broad range of aircraft. I've owned and flown float plane, aerobatic plane, a couple of helicopters, even an Eclipse jet. Bought the T-28 in 2015. I put about 350 hours on it in 3 years. I took up formation flying with the local T6 and T-34 group out of Anoka and Flying Cloud. Practiced every Wednesday at Flying Cloud. Flew most weekends in the summer over formation events. One of the richest experiences of all my flying formation. 2018, August 23rd, we were on a formation flight, and it ended with me crashing and burning at Anoka Airport. The event was a typical 4-ship flyover event in Rochester.
Oh, and I said take a break.
Straight out of Anoka, he and I took off in
Okay.
a takeoff.
Mm-hmm.
We rendezvoused over the I-94 River Bridge at Hudson, and Chris Kosler came out of Richmond in his T6, and Bruce Olson in his T6 out of Flying Cloud formed up, and we turned off towards Rochester. And about 5 or 10 minutes into that leg, I had a generator fail light come on. A little bit about the T-28. It's a 1954 aircraft used for training pilots. It was an advanced trainer for the jets of the day, like the F-86, same cockpit layout as an F-86. And it was used extensively for formation training and training. And when you fly formation, if you're a wingman, you never take your eyes off of the other wingman or lead, ever. In just 1 second, you'll run right into them. You never take your eyes off, and therefore, you don't ever look at the panel inside when you're flying formation, and you'll never see the generator or amp meter down in the lower right-hand corner. So they put a big red light in the panel to let you know when the generator fails. So I saw that, I slipped out of the formation, did a little troubleshooting, and there's nothing you can do when a generator fails. There's no circuit breaker to reset, and when something like that fails, anything electrical fails, you're not supposed to reset the circuit breaker anyways. So I decided to head back to Anoka. I separated out, turned towards Anoka, and pretty much right after that, I could smell something burning in the cockpit. Smell of something burning. Very faint, lasted about 10 seconds, and dissipated and went away. Had no idea what it was. I even asked Chuck Dadco lead if there was fires out west, as we sometimes smell. Uneventful, motored back to Anoka. I've had 9 generator failures in my 3,500 hours in my 40 years of flying. Sad to say, every time I flew back to my home airport, wanting to do service at my home airport. I recommend you don't do that. Got my clearance. I needed electrical power. There's a lot of electrical in this aircraft, and there's an extensive hydraulic system. And you need electric for the actuators, for the hydraulic landing gear, for the canopy, for the speed brake. I needed electrical for radio communications. So I headed back to Anoka, got my clearance through Class D, transition in St. Paul Class D, ATIS and clearance to land in Anoka. Clearance for the brake to land. For those that don't know about the brake to land, it's a landing technique used by formation pilots in the military and the civilian world. And it's used to recover a large gaggle of airplanes in a short period of time without the normal spacing requirements and time consumption. What we do is we line up in echelon, and the lead takes us over the threshold of the runway at 1,000 feet AGL, and he peels off and goes into a 60-degree bank, circling land right down to the threshold. Every 4 seconds, the next guy breaks off 2, 3, 4. Well, even by myself, we always practice that maneuver
So we were proficient at it. It's a very racy maneuver. You're at a low altitude. I'm coming into it at 180 knots, 60-degree bank. And the procedure is to pull 2 Gs. You pull a little power, pull 2 Gs to hold level flight for the first half of the turn, to bleed off airspeed to get down to flapping up and gear operating speed. And in the T-28, you deploy the speed brake. I had the clearance to land for a left brake. I did just that. Full power, 60 degrees bank, pull 2 Gs, drop the speed brake. Instantly, I had billowing smoke filling the cockpit, as if I had turned on my air show smoke system and plumbed it into the cockpit. Thicker than you can even describe. I immediately opened the canopy, and of course, this is a shock and a confusion. But I kept my wits, and I opened the canopy. I announced smoke in the cockpit to the tower. I'll see if I can get my gear down. I leaned over. I held my head against the slipstream, and the smoke was going by my face, but I could keep forward visibility and not breathe in the smoke. Kept the bank in, brought it around about 90 degrees, crosswind position. I'm being sprayed with the fluid, like somebody spraying me with a garden sprayer. At the time, I thought it was fuel. Held the bank, brought it around 180 degrees, a beam of the runway right outside my wingtip. Gear and flaps down. I had a wall of fire coming up between the seat and the interior sidewall. There's about a 2-inch gap, and it's a couple feet long. My hands up here on the throttle, my other hand's on the stick between my legs, higher than my shoulders. Now that is a moment of confusion and shock. And I will tell you, I did quit flying the airplane for about 3 or 5 seconds, trying to figure out what is this, what's going on, and what do I do? I started letting off on the stick, rolling out of the bank, and then I immediately realized, fly the airplane. You've got to fly the airplane. You've got to get it on the ground. You're at 1,000 feet. Put the bank back in, started bringing it around. Now I'm really leaning over, getting away from the flames. 90 degrees, base leg. The flames are coming up between my legs, higher than my head. Fly the airplane, get it down. My focus became very narrow. I didn't think about, is my seatbelt and shoulder harness fastened, or emergency checklist, or emergency procedures. I was desperate. Coming around, I get to about 200 feet AGL. Now the flames are going up the face shield of my helmet inside, burning my face. I'm losing my eyesight. Now that was painful. That was hot. Incidentally, I don't remember my hands burning. This hand burned severely. This leg burned. Legs are burned. And the human body has a way of shutting off those pains to keep essential functions going. Doctors about this. In any event, I realized I couldn't finish the landing. I was losing my eyesight. I knew I was burning alive. Last thing I saw in flight was in my peripheral vision, the runway markers over here. I had overturned, and I instinctively knew I got to get this on the ground no matter what. I pushed the stick forward and I drove it in. I remember retarding the throttle. By the way, when I had the fire, I never even announced it to the tower. I was so occupied with what to do. I drove it in. I don't remember retarding the throttle. I don't remember the point of impact. Next thing I remember, waking up on my back on the ground, just outside the cockpit, to the sound of silence before I was able to see anything, which is significant in the T-28 with that big 1820 radial, 1,425 horsepower with big exhaust pipes unloading right in front of the cockpit. It's 130 decibels in flight. That is why I mounted Bose noise canceling ear cuffs inside my helmet. In any event, I woke up to silence. The next thing I remember is looking down and seeing my feet on fire, and my parachute liner, sheepskin liner, is burning next to my face, and kicking my feet and trying to roll over unsuccessfully. The next thing I remember, a couple of guys are pulling me away from the burning wreckage. I remember a massive explosion, and then I remember They took my parachute off. I told them it would be easier to pull me without the parachute. And I remember giving somebody my wife's name and phone number. And that's the last thing I remember for 2 months. I was airlifted to HCMC Medical Burn Center in Minneapolis, landed in a helicopter on up the roof, where they put me in intensive care and a drug-induced coma for 2 months. To give a little context to my words, I'll show you. There's the bird. It was a very nicely restored airplane. Firewall forward overhaul, including accessories and hoses, new paint job, new avionics. This is, well, there should be a play button here somewhere. There it is. Incidentally, there was a news helicopter in the air not too far away that raced out to the site immediately after the crash. I'm over here on the right where the cars are. I'm sorry, let me do this again.
Chuck, how did you think you got from the aircraft to the ground?
Well, I don't remember getting out of the airplane. I'll tell you what was told to me. First of all, there was 2 Good Samaritans driving on the nearby highway. You can see I barely made it over the highway and I was left, of course, I overturned. One of the Good Samaritans saw the entire event, pulled over, dialed 911. He said when he looked up, he saw a man on the ground with his feet on fire, kicking his feet. He and another Good Samaritan slipped through the fence and came up and drugged me away. Another person that arrived immediately was Mark Jackson, line manager for Lynx FPO on the field. He came out and the 3 of them pulled me away. He was the one that said, look, we got to get him away. This thing's burning up and there's 160 gallons in those wings. He told me in his words, without my dramatizing, I asked him about 8 months later, was there an explosion? He said, yeah, the wing blew. The wing tank blew. And he said it was like commercial fireworks with shrapnel and fire. And where we were standing and where you were lying was engulfed. It's quite a story. I think I got myself out of the airplane. I practiced getting out of that airplane in the hangar with a parachute attached 100 times, because in the event you need to bail out, you need to be able to do that. And it's much harder than a person realizes, especially a small man like me. The seat bucket is like a chair. You have to climb up in, grab the upper rail of the canopy, lift that 25-pound diaper on your butt, and it's an exercise. I had a Hooker 5-point harness that I kept locked and tight. That saved my life. It was made not to come apart. The person that in a forward impact, it's easy to release with the palm of your hand when you have to get out. The person I gave my wife's phone number to and her name and phone number to was Steve Tebow, who arrived on the site right away. And he was my advanced flight instructor for 25 years, gave me my instrument and numerous other training. And he came to visit me in the hospital and he said, I asked him, what did you see? Was the cockpit visible? He said, oh yes, it was sitting upright on its belly, fully engulfed in flame. I asked the Good Samaritan, could you got me out? He said, no. When we ran up to the airplane, it was fully engulfed. We couldn't have got you out. He said, it's a good thing I got out, but I don't remember getting out. It is possible that I was ejected. The wing, you can see here, you'll see in the next photos too, this tail section is facing opposite the direction of flight. When I came in, I estimate I was doing 100 knots, 45 degrees nose down. The propeller broke off, taking the front of the gear case with it, went off to the left. The engine separated at the firewall, went off to the right. The fuselage broke in half behind the rear cockpit at the rear bulkhead of the cockpit, rear cockpit. Structure broke and it flipped up and advanced and landed in front of the rest of the wreckage. The reason it's landing forward, my theory is the structure broke, but the elevator and rudder cables, substantial cables, tethered it, causing it to turn around, land upright without much damage other than being broken off the airplane. The wing broke off as a whole, tipped up and slammed into the tail, and the cockpit section of the fuselage from the firewall to the rear bulkhead slammed into the top of the wing. And the reason we know that, in one of the photos, you'll see the stainless steel firewall embedded in the top of the ring. But the cockpit burnt in its entirety to rubble and ash in the post-crash fire. No, I didn't do this here. Here you'll see the city of Blaine, city offices, fire department, police department is about a quarter mile up the road. This is Detective
Hello, how you
Finn
doing?
from the city of
Real good.
Blaine attending to me, holding an oxygen mask
Yeah.
near my face, but not putting it on because of my burns on my face.
But I'm much better.
Doing good?
Yeah.
Warren came to see me
Here.
at my home about 7 or 8 months after the accident, and he was surprised that I could see. He said my eyes were glazed over pure white from the fire damage. He told me that there was 5 police officers wearing body cam footage, and I talked him into showing me the body cam footage. It took several weeks. He was reluctant. He told me, if you break down, we're stopping. But I made it through it, and I was surprised by what I saw. I was surprised by the wreckage and the flames 20 feet in the air and the billowing column of black smoke. I was surprised by the number of boots on the ground, 30 or 40 people running around doing their jobs. Blaine Police, Blaine Fire Department, airport personnel, Good Samaritans, ambulance personnel, Airlink helicopter personnel. And the third thing that surprised me is when one of the policemen wearing his body cam straight out bent over to help attend to me, and I could see myself. You can see my face is charred black, my eyes were white, and I was chatting away like I'm talking to you. And I don't remember it, I was in shock. I don't have any memory of that. Sorry, I'm going to consult my notes here. So yes, they airlifted me to HCMC. Where they kept me in intensive care in a drug-induced coma. They kept me in the drug-induced coma because at 65 years old, they didn't think I would survive the pain of the daily cleanings. 20 skin graft surgeries when I was in the coma. I had 2nd and 3rd degree burns over 40% of my body, which means they used another 40% of my good skin as donor site for skin grafts, which they consider the donor sites as equivalent to a 2nd degree burn. And I cannot emphasize what a trauma this is on anybody's body. And at 65, they told me about a year after, I'm still going to the hospital for therapy at that time, they confided in me that the doctors and staff did not think I would live. My wife, my dear wife, visited me every day when I was in a coma. She'd call the listen to me, the hospital every morning and ask my status, and they'd say, for the first 10 days, but I made it through the night. We're still trying to stabilize his vitals. My breathing, my heart rate, blood pressure was just sky high and plummeting. I did have severe burns on my hand from holding the stick. They amputated the 4 fingers at the first knuckle. Severe burns on my right leg. Severe burns in my right eye. There was discussion of amputating my right leg and my right eye. They thought for sure I wouldn't have vision, and they were one of the big dangers of burns is infection. Your skin protects you from infection. And I went through a series of infections, but they were able to keep it under control. And they thought that I get infected, it'll go straight to the brain and kill me. About that. Well, for my eye, they did a procedure called Procura, where they take membrane from a amniotic sac of a pregnant woman that has stem cell properties, create a little contact lens, put it on your eye, and stitch your eye shut for about 3 or 4 days. They did this 10 times. And when they woke me up from the coma, I couldn't open this eye. I was still very swollen. This eye, I had blurry vision. And every week, there'd be 2 eye doctors and 4 residents come in because I was a case study for Procura. They call me the poster child for Procura because one day I said, I think I can see light out of this eye. Come over here and lift this eyelid. They did, and I could see them standing there. I could count their fingers. They saved my eyes.
What a blessing.
I'm so glad they weren't hasty about these amputations. Eyesight is huge, as everyone knows. Oh, my leg. This is just a medical story.
Wow.
Hey, thank you very much. Thank you. This is an interesting story I'll share with you. This is my right shin, and there's very little tissue between your bone and your skin on your shin. It burnt to the bone. And for skin graft, you have to have underlying tissue with blood supply. The bone provides, exterior of the bone provides no blood supply, so they couldn't graft over it. But what they did is they did fenestration holes. That's what they call it. I don't know, thousands of little itty bitty holes in the bone to let bone marrow seep out to provide a blood supply for the skin to close and grow shut. Every day I'm looking down, I'm seeing 6 inches by 1 inch of bone, which is just not right. But after 16 months, it reduced to 3 inches, from 6 inches to 3 inches, from 1 inch to about 5/8 inch. It was encroaching in, it was working, and then it quit. The bone section that was exposed died. I was going in for a surgery. I asked the doctor to look at it. He went with the tweezer and pulled that section of bone away. Now I'm looking down at the bone marrow. That's not right either. But it provided a rich supply of blood. So after 16 months of gradual, in 1 month it closed up. It's closed today. They saved my leg. That was another big risk. I caught MRSA in the hospital, which is an infection that there's no antibiotic for. And the worry was if it gets in the bone, they can't treat it, they can't do anything with it because you don't have regular blood supply. You have blood in there, it makes blood. In any event, sorry for keeping this grotesque photo on. Burns have a lot of consequence. When they first woke me up, after 2 months in a coma, I had severe atrophy. I'm still 30 pounds lighter than before the accident and weaker. They tipped me up in bed for the first week. I'd flop right over. My muscles didn't work. My nerves didn't work. I had no strength, severe atrophy. Interesting sideline. Here you can see it. This is a feeding tube going, I believe that's a feeding tube going right into my small intestine. The body requires so much energy for healing. They were feeding me 10,000 calories a day, and I was still losing weight. One of the criteria for letting me go home is to make sure I could keep that consumption up. Well, I didn't do a very good job. The first 3 weeks of going home, I lost 17 pounds, and my wife put me on a horse feeding. Anyhow, learned to walk with a walker. 4 months in the hospital, 8 months on oxycodone, codone for pain management, 10 months of home care, feeding, bathing, bandaging. It's a long, slow recovery. 20 surgeries in the hospital, 11 since I've been out. I have probably another half a dozen, of mainly reconstructive. Physical therapy, 17 months, 5 days a week, outpatient. In any event, it worked. When they first woke me up, your body has a phenomenon that in these situations where it produces calcium in your joints and they seize up. And when they first woke me up, they could only raise my arms and it was painful this high. And from the day after the burn, they start the therapy of wrenching your arms. And after 17 months, they did their job. It's phenomenal, the recovery I've had. When I woke up, I couldn't get my arm more than about 18 inches from my face. You know, anyhow, that's enough about the medical stuff. It's a long journey. About the source of the fire. Obviously, the cockpit burnt into nothing but ash and rubble. There's no looking at anything of that sort. My speculation is that for various reasons, it was an electrical component that got very hot and compromised the hydraulic line. When you're flying a normal flight and the gear and flaps and speed brake are up, canopies closed, the hydraulic system, the engine driven hydraulic pump, it goes in bypass, there's no pressure. When I dropped the speed brake, that's when the smoke came. The hydraulic system pressurized. The engine-driven hydraulic pump, you'll appreciate this, produces 1,650 PSI. When I'm on the ground in static mode, I drop the flaps without air resistance. It goes down to about 1,200. So there was probably 1,000 pounds or better of hydraulic pressure, pumping hydraulic fluid, creating a blowtorch below the cockpit floor, which is a thin aluminum skin. There's about a 2-foot space between the floor and the bottom of the aircraft where the wing root comes through, and a spaghetti network of hydraulic lines and electrical, thousands of layers. 64 years old wires and accurate and electrical components. Inherent risk. The smoke was white, which is oil, unlike the fuel that you saw burning here is black. My flight suit, okay, the NTSB inspector met me out here. Wentworth Aircraft had the wreckage in one of these hangars, and I was able to meet the NTSB inspector out here, and they spread the wreckage all over for inspection, and I wanted to see what I could learn. Particularly of interest to me was the engine, to see if there was any fire damage or anything of that sort. There was none, nothing on the back of the engine showing any fire damage. The fuel pump was intact, the oil pump, hydraulic pump was intact, exhaust system was intact. Of course, all the lines broke and wires broke. We found the firewall, and in the firewall, there's a oval aluminum inspection panel that you crawl up in the wheel well in the ground, take it off, and service the back of the engine and all the accessories. No evidence of fire penetration in the firewall or that access door. I remember I told you I had some spray coming on me. My flight suit is back here and my helmet for your viewing in a photo book. And the flight suit is saturated with an oily substance and smells of petroleum. And the NTSB inspector cut a swatch off and sent it to an Air Force chemical laboratory where they did an analysis and determined that the flight suit did have the same chemicals found in hydraulic fluid. 2 weeks after my incident, one of the T-28 guys out of the Oshkosh area was in his airplane with his wife and had a severe smell of something burning. He was able to get it on the ground without further incident. and found an electrical wire had turned red hot. When these aircraft were released from the military in the early 90s, there was a couple of outfits that did restorations, preparing them for civilian use. And they added numerous aftermarket accessories like a pre-oil pump to fill the oil journals before you start the engine, a scavenge pump, electric scavenge pump, to drain the crankcase. The crankcase holds about 3 to 4 gallons of oil in operation. Normal procedure and shutdown is idle at 1200 RPM for 2 minutes to use the engine-driven scavenge pump to get the oil out of the crankcase into the remote tank. But you still have the chance of hydraulic lock and spewing oil all over the side of your airplane when you start. Mine had both of these. Mine also had a auxiliary electric hydraulic pump so that you could operate the gear if you're on jacks without the engine running, the flaps, the canopy, speed brake. That's a 40 amp motor. And after my accident, my friend's incident, the T-28 fleet owners did thorough inspections, and they found that many of these auxiliary electric hydraulic pumps with a 40 amp motor were wired without circuit protection, and wiring was even tied to hydraulic lines. I don't know what the source was. I can't say, but I'm just saying. I'll talk about pre-flight inspections in a little bit, and I'll talk about circuit protection. So I believe it was hydraulic fluid spraying on something electrical that got hot. I'll show you some crash photos. Here again, you can see the tail section facing the opposite direction of flight. There it is with the close-up. You'll see the wheel. The landing gear is undamaged, which suggests a very steep nose-down impact. Tail broke off. Wing broke off as a whole and slammed against the tail. Fuselage was back where the smoke is. Here's the other side. Again, landing gear extended and undamaged. This is the wing that burnt and exploded. These pictures were given to me by the Anoka County Crime Investigation Unit. They gave me 99 high-resolution photos. Otherwise, I would never have known what it looked like. And I called and asked for the photos, and they said, "Are you sure it wasn't sabotage?" I don't think so. You can see there's no fuselage to be seen. Here's the engine off on the left. Again, no fuselage. Gear case housing broke away, taking the planetary gear set with it. Skid marks about 40 or 50 feet long, 100 knots to zero in a short distance. I had invited 2 passengers. I gave rides very often. I'm sure glad they weren't available. They would have had a heck of a ride as that tail section came around. They would have had broken legs and would have been pinned in and burned, as you can see. Beautiful airplane, nicely restored, lots of fun, very powerful. Initial rate of climb 5,000 feet a minute. But you can see it was obviously a violent crash. And I drove it in hard, but it's hard for me to criticize because I'm here to talk about it. Suggestions for flight safety. Some of these will bore you, they're generic. POH, have it in your cockpit in reach. Know your emergency checklists, read them, and incidentally, many manufacturers, certainly in the advanced aircraft, put certain line items in their checklist in bold print. These are meant to be memorized. They're called memory items. You don't need to pull a checklist out. If something happens, you know what these basic things are that you need to do immediately. Obviously, in my case, I couldn't pull out a checklist, and there was none for an in-flight cockpit fire, by the way. Other than bail out, I suppose. Pre-flight the aircraft, all of these aircraft engines are generally mounted in rubber mounts and they move around. This radial engine, it's about 42 inches in diameter and it moved about an inch each direction and in the various sequences, starting and adding power and reducing power. That's a lot of movement for electric lines, hydraulic lines, fuel lines. About every 3 or 4 hours, I'd take a bright flashlight, open the canopy, and do a thorough inspection. It wasn't uncommon to find the beginning of chafing or an oil leak. Look for cracks in the oil, in the exhaust system. Many things can cause failure, fatigue from age, vibration, pressure cycles, heat cycles. We talked about circuit protection. Carry a portable fire extinguisher. Now, remember, my event was very rare. I've never heard of anybody having such an experience. But carry a fire extinguisher. If you have an emergency off airport landing, you could easily have a post-crash fire. Here's an important one. Fly with your seatbelt and shoulder harness on, tight, and locked. When I had smoke and I had fire, I didn't think about that. I had all I could do to fly the airplane. Okay, for warbird pilots, crop dusters, airshow pilots, aerobatic pilots, wear a helmet, of course. It saved my life. Install a quick release in the comm line. So if you climb out, it unplugs right here. I know of a T-28 pilot by the name of Brian Schuler, the famous SR-71 pilot that suffered burns when he had a crash landing in a T-28, climbed out and found he was tethered and had to climb back in. His face and hands are burned severely. Quick release. I talked about practicing. If you wear a parachute, practice exiting the cockpit when you're in the hangar. It's harder than it seems. Where for these type of operations, wear a Nomex flight suit as I did, and gloves. My flight suit, Nomex flight suit, saved my life. My gloves, unfortunately, were in a bag on the floor. And the reason why, I think only about 5% of T-28 pilots wear the gloves. You've got a big heater up front. I had an infrared gun in flight. The firewall consistently ran 130 degrees, and you're in a glass canopy, greenhouse. It's very hot. It's not uncommon after a 45-minute or hour flight, wearing shorts and a t-shirt under your flight suit, you have to take a shower. You're soaking wet. So I didn't wear the gloves. I paid the price. It's also hard to tune radios and use your touch screen on your GPS. In any event, I recommend it. And then the last item on flight safety for especially old warbirds is automatic fire suppression system. Here the pilots have them. You can get them in impact actuated and heat activated. So there's many potential types of fire, from the smell of something burning to a small open flame to an emergency off airport landing with post-crash fire. And there's also a flash fire. And I've had a lot of patients at the hospital that were exposed to flash fire, like propane in a motorhome. It's just a flash and it takes your skin. And if you're flying along and you smell fuel in the cockpit, you probably want to ventilate those fumes out of the cockpit and not create a spark. If you think there's a fire imminent and you're flying, you got to prepare your mindset. Unlike me, I had to do it on the fly. If you have a generator failure, consider DC power off, get on the ground. You don't know what might be cooking out of your sight. Any indication of something burning, DC power off, smell fuel, vent the canopy without creating a spark. get it on the ground, find a place to land. In all cases, land as soon as possible. And in the case of an in-flight fire, you don't have any choice but to get the fire out or get out. And I don't know what to say about face protection. I really don't know what to say. You can't last very long. I believe I suffered all my burns in the 20 to 25 seconds of in-flight. I didn't burn out in the post-crash fire. I was outside the cockpit at that point. And I was at the end of my human endurance. Here's my buddies. Some things that I have learned. No guarantees in life. Life is very fragile and it's very precious. The consequences of an accident like mine are far-reaching. And the trauma impacts many people. So pilots, please, use caution. Do it for yourself, do it for your passengers, do it for your family and loved ones. Okay, on a lighter note, obviously, gotta have some humor in life. One day my wife and I were talking about how amazing it is they can take skin off my back and do it from my neck, ear to ear, to the back of my head. The fire went in inside my helmet, melted the helmet liner, and I'm skin graft to the back of my head. It looks like nail pattern molds. I had hair, by the way. I had eyebrows and eyelashes. In any event, we're talking about how amazing it was. And two things. One thing, I'm glad I didn't have a hairy back. Later in the evening, I asked my wife, I said, I got a backache. Can you rub my back? And she comes up and goes. We joke about it, you have to. I married an angel. She took care of me, my wife and my kids and my family. And a support system like that is so important for recovery and healing and motivating you to keep going. As I said, my flight suit and helmet is in the back. There's a written narrative. I did a written narrative of this. Here's my family, my wife, daughter, son, daughter-in-law, son-in-law, and two of my grandkids. They're every day for me. I did a written narrative that was published in 6 aviation publications. You may have seen it. It's available on Minnesota Flyer. If you Google go to their website, they Google Cook. And a video, I did a video presentation, I think it was April or so of this year at the Minnesota Pilots Association, and they have this presentation, a video of this presentation online. You want to share it? I'll give my closing comments and I'll answer any questions. So fly safe, have fun, no matter what, fly the airplane and try to land it shiny side up. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
How high were you? What altitude when you started having these issues?
When I turned towards home, we were probably at 3,000 feet. When I entered the pattern, I was at 1,000 feet.
Had you considered, since you were wearing a parachute, had you considered leaving the aircraft using the parachute?
I had no idea what lied ahead. The smell was faint and dissipated in 5 or 10 seconds. I really did not. And for pilots with a parachute, if you think you're going to have an in-flight fire, if you're going to go somewhere to land, first go to a rural location and get altitude. And prepare yourself to jump out if this thing goes. So, But no, I did not think of it. And when I was in the pattern, had smoke and fire in a populated area at a low altitude, I didn't see it as a possibility.
Been back flying.
Only commercial. No, I don't want, my wife worries. And I'm actually, after 40 years, 38 years of flying in all these different aircraft, I have a lifetime of memories and I'm happy to have my feet on the ground. But I want you guys to enjoy yourself. Don't let this scare you. It's a very rare occurrence. I just share my story. Well, I'll hang around if anybody has any further questions. So thank you again for listening.
Chuck, as a token of our appreciation, I'd like to present you a glass on behalf of Chapter 25. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will put this to use.
Thank you. That's all we have tonight. Again, the banquet reminder. And for anybody that doesn't know, it's Gary Powers Jr. is going to be presenting on the shoot down of his father at the banquet. So please attend if you're able. Good night.
That was great. Yeah.
Yeah.